Now, your application namespace is basically anything under your app directory will be namespace with a default of app. So you might want to change this because when you're working within your code, you might want to have your business name or your project name, and we can actually very easily generate this with Laravel. So let's first of all just take a look inside of app at some of our files. So Laravel ships with a user model already, and this is namespaced under app. If you're not too familiar on the concept of namespacing, it might be worth checking out the series we have on what namespaces are and how they're used. So in this case, the user model would be namespaced under app user. Pretty straightforward. And this goes the same for things like our controllers. So for example, our base controller is namespaced under app HTTP controllers, as well as a few other things as well. So everything under this app directory is namespaced under app. And the reason for that is we're using PSR4 autoloading. Now, again, if we head over to our composer.json file, you can see here under the autoload section, we are PSR4 autoloading under the app vendor namespace. This is referred to as a vendor namespace, and we're loading from this directory. All this means is we don't have to require things everywhere. We just can use them by their full namespace, and namespacing helps resolve conflicts between the classes that you create which may have the same name. So again, we have a series on that, but that's the basics of PSR4 autoloading. Now, what about if we want to change this, the whole point of this part? Well, we can easily do this again with an artisan command. So you might think, oh, I have to go through and change all of these myself. Of course you don't. Using artisan, we can do this really easily. So we run php artisan app name, and then we give the name. So some important considerations here. The kind of standard for this is to use a capital letter. So for example, this was called fresh app. We would do this in kind of camel casing or studly casing. And we should try and avoid things like lower case for the first letter. Now, I'd recommend you create this to something quite short, just in case you do have to create anything yourself. You don't want to have to write fresh app or fresh app project every time you namespace a file. So in our case, we'll call this fresh, capital F, very straightforward. We hit enter, and our application namespace has now been set. So you notice as I flick back to the auth controller, that's been set there. It's been set here as well. It's been set here. It's been set everywhere that we need it. So over in our user model as well. So that's pretty much it. I'd highly recommend, just to avoid any kind of conflict, that when you create your project from the start, generate your key then. That means that when you go ahead and generate any more files, you don't have to worry about this command failing or your application breaking because it couldn't update a particular namespace. So there we go. That's how we generate our application namespace. Of course, you don't have to do this, but it makes sense as a kind of branding thing within your application to have the name of your project, business, or your own name or your first name in there just to play around. So there we go. That's how easy it is using the command line.